This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. So I'm doing a bit of a series of videos to open the week, right, where we're going to focus really deeply on the quarterback position and really go through every option that's available for the Cleveland Browns, right? We talked before the start of this week about just Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward and if they're worth the pick at 2. Then this morning, I did a video about the diamonds in the rough, talking about the other quarterback options in detail, right? Your Jalen Milrose of the world, your Jackson Darts, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel, the guys who aren't going to go at the top of this draft class. But right now, what I want to do is focus on the free agents, because that's going to be a huge part of how the Browns potentially answer this quarterback problem, at least for 2025. And it's important to remember that a lot of the solutions out there for the Cleveland Browns are simply going to be 1 to 2 year solutions, right? You're not going to find a great long-term option here in the draft or in free agency, or at least if you do, you should consider yourself very lucky, because it's not very likely that you find yourself a long-term option. Some years there are long-term options available at quarterback. Some years there's not. This is one of those years where it does not appear that there's going to be, some tier 1, tier 2 starter sitting out there for you to go grab or draft, right? So I'm going to rank these options based on what I feel about these players in 2 different categories. I'm going to rank veteran quarterbacks and I'm going to rank younger quarterbacks, right? Guys under 30 who haven't played that much. And then the veteran quarterbacks are guys over 30 or guys who have played about 6 seasons worth of starts or have been the starter for their team for about 6 seasons. Also, this is not going to be a strictly linear list, so I will have gaps in between some of these rankings, which will change the ranking. So, for example, my number 1 guy is Kirk Cousins. My number 2 guy is Russell Wilson. But Russell Wilson's not number 2 on this list. He's actually number 4. Between 1 and 4, there's a gap. So I think a pretty sizable gap between what you could expect in the Browns offense with Kirk Cousins versus Russell Wilson. So all that being said, let's get started. Number 1 guy on the list is Kirk Cousins. Now, this does not mean that I think Kirk Cousins is going to be franchise quarterback or even what he was in Minnesota with the Cleveland Browns, but I do think Kirk Cousins will be better than he was in Atlanta with the Cleveland Browns if he does end up here. Part of it is continuity and familiarity. He's going back to not just a system that he knows very well, but a coach in Kevin Stefanski that he has worked with a ton. So it's a very comfortable environment for him. I think being back in the Midwest would be really good for Kirk Cousins. Remember, he played at Michigan State, so this is a familiar region of the country for him. Also, another thing that I think will be good for Kirk Cousins is getting another year of healing on that Achilles injury, right? First year after an Achilles recovery is usually pretty rough on whoever it is, especially a 30-plus-year-old quarterback who wasn't mobile to begin with. So I expect it to be very tough for Kirk Cousins, or at least it was tough for Kirk Cousins to come back. Look, Kirk Cousins ended the season pretty bad, so people are pretty negative on Kirk Cousins right now. I've been through this roller coaster with Kirk, right? People go up with Kirk, people go down with Kirk, but at the end of the day, Kirk Cousins is usually Kirk Cousins, right? He's not as bad as you think Kirk Cousins is. He's not as good as you think Kirk Cousins is. Kirk Cousins is usually who Kirk Cousins has always been, which is a mid-level quarterback, right? Somebody who is a decent starter at times, and if you put him in the right offense, can give you pretty solid results. I think that's still who Kirk Cousins is up until this point. No, he's not in his prime anymore. No, he's not going to move as well as he did in Minnesota. But again, people have a tendency to pile on when Kirk Cousins plays bad. And also in reverse order, if Kirk Cousins does come here, he plays well, people will do the opposite. People will jump on the bandwagon and pump up Kirk Cousins and say that he should be in the MVP conversation or something like that. Look, people go crazy with Kirk Cousins either direction. I wouldn't get too wrapped up into that. If you're looking at the veteran quarterback options available this free agency, it is obvious that Kirk Cousins is likely to be your best option available. He comes with the least baggage. He has the most compatibility with what the Cleveland Browns run. He has familiarity with the offensive coordinator and head coach of the team. He is exactly what you would be looking for in this kind of a situation. If you were the Cleveland Browns, I expect them to pursue him pretty aggressively. It would make a ton of sense here. Is it going to solve your quarterback problem long term? No. Is it going to solve your quarterback problem and make it definitive for this year? More than likely, right? But, it's not going to be something that pulls you past like 2026. So it would be a short-term option. It would likely be a cheap option because he's likely to be released from the Atlanta Falcons. I know they're trying to act like they're going to keep him as a backup, but that's a bluff. Kirk Cousins makes the most sense of any free agent option here for the Cleveland Browns, especially when you consider what the money is. I expect that to be option number one, young or old. But if we're talking about veteran quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins, there's a red blinking light that says this makes sense. This obviously makes sense for the Cleveland Browns. I understand why people would be concerned, but again, we've been through this roller coaster so much with Kirk, right? When you think he's terrible, he's not terrible. When you think he's like amazing, he's not amazing. He is just comfortably in the middle, and with the internet, we don't know what to do with guys who sit there. I do. He's Kirk Cousins. All right, there's a gap between Kirk Cousins and the next option, and then I have number 3, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers still is playing decently. He did play his best football in a West Coast offense with Matt LaFleur. The problem with Aaron Rodgers is that he comes with significantly more baggage than Kirk Cousins does, and I don't know how much significantly better the play will be than Kirk. Both these guys coming off Achilles injuries. The thing with Kirk is that you're not going to have to deal with him being on podcasts and, talking and all that other shit. With Aaron Rodgers, you're going to have to deal with some off the field stuff. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think Browns fans just kind of deserve a break from nonsense at the quarterback position. I think Browns fans will, there'll be some people who roll their eyes at the thought of bringing in Kirk Cousins, but give it a couple of weeks, those same Browns fans will be all in on Kirk. Aaron Rodgers is going to be a different story, right? Where I think people are going to kind of be hostile to the idea, or at least this ideal is not going to sit well with folks. And then Aaron's going to pick up on that. Aaron's going to have an attitude. Everything about this off the field just makes me nervous. But if we're just looking at this from an on the field perspective, it does make sense for the Cleveland Browns to want to pursue somebody that they see as a fit in the offense and still has enough talent to be able to operate that offense effectively. He's a veteran quarterback. People are going to think you're going to get better at the quarterback position with Aaron Rodgers there. And it would be a wish fulfillment pick for a lot of Browns fans who wanted somebody like Aaron Rodgers at the position. I just think at this point, there's a question of if his baggage outweighs his play, because he has been kind of talked about more for stuff that he says than stuff that he does in recent years, which is what it is with Aaron Rodgers. All right, let's go number 4 here, Russell Wilson. I think the 3, 4, and 5 are pretty much in the same group. Russell Wilson, the issue with Russ is I don't know if it's a great fit for what Kevin likes to do. Kevin likes to use the middle of the field. Kevin likes to get his guys rolling left to right. Kevin likes to get his guys to throw downfield, and that's all stuff that Russ, he doesn't do as well as he used to do. Russ does well with Pittsburgh when he could just throw to the sides of the field and throw deep to George Pickens. He doesn't really use the middle of the field that well. So I worry about fit. But we did just see Russ have a pretty functional season with Pittsburgh. I think that season also kind of erased any concerns you have about Russ's baggage at this point, right? The question with Russ is, what's the price going to be? Is he still going to think he can get $30 million or something like that? If that's the case, hell no on Russell Wilson, right? Especially when Kirk Cousins is sitting there for what will likely be not that much money. Daniel Jones, I see in a similar category. I think a lot of people are low on Daniel Jones, kind of similar to Kirk Cousins. When this dude is bad, people love to pile on Daniel Jones. I've done it myself, right? There's just something about Daniel Jones that makes it easy to pile on him. But He's a young guy. He's had some decent years as a starter in the league. He's had some good moments in the league. I think he's smart enough to run an offense. I think if you do put him in like a West Coast offense, there is a chance with that structure that he plays well enough for you to get away with him as your starter for a couple of years. He's the one guy in this veteran category that isn't super old. Daniel Jones would be the last guy you could bring in to compete for the starting job as a veteran quarterback that I would feel like, okay, there's a chance that could work out. Everybody else below this, I think, is destined not to finish the year, right? Like, I think Daniel Jones is the last guy. So if we're talking about guys who have a chance to start and finish the year and maybe do something with the Browns, I think it's Kirk Cousins. I think that's Aaron Rodgers. I think that's Russell Wilson. I think that's Daniel Jones. Everybody else, I'd be surprised if you get a full year out of them. And, like, you would have to catch lightning in a bottle for that to work out the way you want to. So let's go ahead and move to my next group of guys. These are guys I have as backup quarterbacks. 8 through 13 are basically the same ranking. Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy Garoppolo, Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, Joe Flacco. All of these guys I mentioned will be capable of giving you some solid starts throughout the year. You're going to get a solid start or two from Jacoby Brissett or Jimmy Garoppolo or Marcus Mariota or Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton or Joe Flacco. The problem is I don't think you're going to get a solid season from any of these guys. I like Jacoby Brissett more than most. I still kind of recognize that when he has to play extended periods of time, start for 12, 13 plus games, his flaws start to show up. Jimmy Garoppolo, it's long documented. I'm not a big fan of Jimmy Garoppolo, but he does fit the offense and is experienced here. Marcus Mariota, same kind of deal as Jimmy. Not a big fan of him, but does fit the offense, does has experience. Jameis Winston, he's going to throw a lot of interceptions, but, youngest guy that you could throw in there that has that problem, because Andy Dalton, something similar, even though Jameis has better arm talent. Joe Flacco, Jameis does not have better arm talent than Joe Flacco, but Joe Flacco is like 38 years old at this point. So that has to keep him down on the list here. Then I think there's a gap. And then we get to guys that I'm like, hey, man, if you're telling me this is going to be the starter, then we're not trying to win games, right? Those guys are Josh Dobbs, Mason Rudolph, Cooper Rush, right? If you bring in one of these three guys and you're like, hey, Quincy, these going to be the starters, I'm going to start questioning if you want to win. I got to be honest with you. And then you have the lowest tier, which is like, y'all not even trying to act like y'all gonna win if y'all start them, which is Case Keenum and Brandon Allen. Those are my veteran quarterback rankings. Kirk Cousins makes the most sense financially. Kirk Cousins makes the most sense on a football perspective. I know why people are turning their nose up at it, but come on, man. Like, we've done this so many times with Kirk Cousins where we either pile on or people are like jumping on the bandwagon. And it's like, at some point, man, we got to understand this dude's just Kirk Cousins, right? Like, no matter how good he's playing, he's Kirk Cousins. No matter how bad he's playing, he's Kirk Cousins. He's been that pretty consistently since 2012 or 2013. So I don't know why people are acting like Kirk Cousins is like some kind of awful option here. It's fine. It's a Kirk Cousins option. It's not great. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, the Browns are going to win the Super Bowl. The Browns are guaranteed to make the playoffs because we signed Kirk Cousins. But I do think Kirk Cousins is much better than what you had starting at quarterback at any point of the 2024 season for the Cleveland Browns. And you can argue any point during the 2023 season for the Cleveland Browns, right? So it would be fine. It wouldn't be amazing. It would be fine. All right, let's go to younger quarterbacks. This is where we're going to start talking about guys like Sam Darnold, Kyle Trask, Trey Lance. I'm going to rank these guys similarly to how I did the veteran quarterbacks. Let's start with Sam, who is number one on this list because he has demonstrated that he could play good football in the right system. He's young enough and lacks enough experience to where you could believe that he just kind of turned the right corner and that he's going to be able to be this tier 3-ish starter that he's been with the Minnesota Vikings. The question with Sam Darnold is price. Is the price going to be high or is the price going to be manageable? Like, would you rather throw a bunch of money at Sam Darnold or spend a very modest amount of money on Kirk Cousins? Me personally, if it's the choice is $40 million for Sam Darnold or like 5 for Kirk Cousins, I'm just going to go for Kirk Cousins. But if the price is a little bit more comparable, right? If we're talking about 10 million guaranteed, 20 million in incentives a year for Sam Darnold, then it starts to be more of a conversation to be had, because I do think Sam Darnold is the best possible player they could get. But if we're talking about value, I think that becomes Kirk Cousins. That's the debate here between the younger and the older quarterback. JJ McCarthy, he's the only other guy I think you could go after that you could consider will start in the same way that if you went after Kirk Cousins, he's going to start. Aaron Rodgers, he's going to start. Russell Wilson, he's going to start. So if we're looking at those options, right, guys who can start, and if you bring them in, it's unquestioned that they're likely to be the starter. It's 1 to 4 on the veteran quarterback list, and it's 1 to 2 on the younger quarterback list. So we're talking about Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy. The issue with JJ McCarthy is, again, price, right? When we're talking about a younger quarterback, price is going to pop up quite a bit, because if a young, good quarterback is available, well, they're going to be expensive. JJ McCarthy, the question is, how expensive is that going to be for the Cleveland Browns? I'm not on I would trade a first-round pick for JJ McCarthy. I think that's nuts. But I would trade a third-round pick for JJ McCarthy. The question is, if they're willing to accept a third-round pick for JJ McCarthy, why in the world are we trading for him? Because obviously something's wrong. There's a catch-22 when it comes to him. His availability isn't guaranteed. So if his availability is there, that means that there's probably something wrong with him, because they just drafted this dude number 8th overall. Either way, that's where I have JJ McCarthy. All right, then I have a gap between these guys and the next set of guys. These are basically the last young quarterbacks that if you bring in, I would have any faith in. Kyle Trask, I do think is intriguing, especially for what the Browns want to do. Justin Fields, who I think is a little bit less intriguing, despite the fact that he has more on-field experience than Kyle Trask by a significant margin, just because I've seen Justin Fields struggle at the very things that he needs to be successful at for the Browns to run their offense. Kyle Trask, from the small things I've seen in his preseason games, I think has a chance to be able to do those things. And then Malik Willis, who you would have to trade for. Again, what the trade compensation is going to be for him is a big question, but Malik Willis would make some sense there. And then that's it for young guys that I would have like faith could do anything. Everybody else would just be random flyer, right? So number 10, Trey Lance, not much faith in him. I know he was an early pick, super talented guy, but it seems like something's broke there. Drew Lock, number 11, not much faith in him. Then there's a gap. Mac Jones, almost a negative amount of faith in him. And then Zach Wilson, similar ordeal, not really trustworthy of what he has to bring to the table. But that's how I would rank these free agent quarterback options. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.